You are listening to Fika with Vicky on United Public Radio, 107.7 and 105.3 from New Orleans.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fika with our returning guest, Irisanya Moon, and me, your host, Vicky Benison. Irisanya is an author, witch, poet, international teacher, and death care worker. And her latest book, Artemis, Goddess of the Wild Hunt and Sovereign Heart, there we go. Perfect. Perfect timing. Had me returning to the wild trails of my past. Those times when a piece of chain would break, my instinct spoke loudly, and the power of my heart prevailed. It's good to do a little housekeeping once in a while to find those things that you may have lost but need. Irisanya and her book Artemis helped me to find them. And I'm sure those beginning their trails will find it helpful as well. Looking into the unknown, not knowing what to expect, what trails, what tools they'll need, and even where to find the guidance to move forward. It's never too early or too late to go wild. Thank you, Irisanya, for writing this thoughtful, full of thought book. And welcome to Fika.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad to be back, and I'm so glad that you liked the book.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So
I like it. I'm a little biased, though.
Well, you did a fine job, and you should like it. If you don't like it, how are we going to? It's the same with the people. Yes, it's a subject you're passionate about, and by doing that, you bring the passion to other people. So, before we start this wild rumpus of a conversation that we promised ourselves, no holding back. Can you tell us a little bit about Artemis herself and why you chose to write this book and some of the process you went through in doing so?
Sure. So I would like to start with where I sort of met Artemis in my life, and unexpectedly. So one of the tricks with telling stories about my history is that I'm beginning to think that they don't always happen in the order I say that they're happening in. So it's now history because I'm going to say it this way today. My memory says that back when I was living in the Midwest of the US, I used to go for runs or walks out in the woods. And this was long before I was a witch or considered that, I think. Again, it gets a little blurry now. But I was out one day and came upon a deer. And it was this really magical moment of meeting each other I feel like it was misty, or maybe this is an addition to in my memory, but sort of having this moment of gazing at this deer and us just looking at each other and feeling this as a very important moment. And in my head, I said, Artemis. I'm not sure I knew who Artemis was at that point, but there was something really important in that moment. And that has sort of brought me to this moment now through a lot of different steps and paths and stories and things like that. But that was my first meeting that I can recall. And then I've also worked with her in different magical spaces, BC or British Columbia Witch Camp in 2015 is my next memory of that. Artemis is a lot of things. So Artemis is a Greek goddess. She is one of the Olympians. She is often described as a huntress, the twin sister of Apollo. She is normally seen with bow and arrow. She's also described as a virgin goddess. A lot of the stories of her are in battle or some sort of conflict, but also there are different interpretations of stories in which she is a softer being. Often she is the one who's protecting young girls and is there at their initiatory rites. But overall, it's hard to sort of encapsulate her because she is, for me at least, the wild. She is the one who is so connected to animals and to nature and to the mountains that she will do anything to protect that. And that makes her fierce, and that makes her dangerous. And it makes her very clear about what for her is hers and what is not for anyone else. But as you can imagine, that makes her a very powerful and a very sometimes tricky goddess to work with. She is very clear about what she deserves and the importance that she deserves.
And setting boundaries, I would say. She's
oh, yes. She's big into the boundaries. Yes.
Which is necessary when you're protecting things. And it makes you fiercer, perhaps. And she asked, she didn't just, you said what she found important, why she is important, and that she understood her importance. She asked Zeus for the forest and the mountains and the wilderness, I think you wrote.
Yes. She also asks for her virginity, I think, too. I write about a lot of Greek gods, so sometimes the stories get a little mushed in my head, so I apologize. But I feel like she also stood up for that. She is very clear that this is mine. And there is a certain, I think from the culture that I'm in and live in right now, there's a certain like, oh, is that too much? It's not. You can ask for anything, you might not get it. But I think that there's a really important lesson in that. Ask for what is really what you want.
And that I I just have to say, I see the picture of this little girl sitting on the lap of this guy with a long white beard, and it brings Santa images to me, right? This is what I want for a lifetime, for eternity. I am asking for this. Why is it that you think is so difficult for some of us to ask for what we want? Is it just we've been told to shush so often?
I think the puritanical sort of way of thinking makes us believe that we can only have a certain amount and still be a good person. I think that that's the trick. I think that there are ways in which I was brought up to not ask for more than what I deserved. And not necessarily in a mean way or anything like that, but I think of the phrase of like the tall poppy syndrome. You don't want to be too much more than other folks. And I think that's where that comes in. There is this, sort of guilt or even shame around wanting more than what you have.
When you talk about that just now, when you said that, and you talked about the too tall poppy or whatever, that brings attention to you. And in the wilderness, in the wild, in life, attention can mean danger.
Yes.
I mean, whether someone's going to pick on you or steal that poppy or whatever the point is. And she wasn't afraid.
No, I mean, I think, and to be fair, even in being in leadership as the tall poppy or anything like that, that is dangerous a lot of time because it conflates having like that position with power, right? And so that can be tricky. And as we look throughout Greek mythology, if there was ever a question about power and whether or not someone had enough, then war broke out or conflict or something.
Yes, right.
And so that's a big theme throughout the mythology.
And I think you talk about bringing the context of Artemis in the past into the context of Artemis in now. How does she relate to us now? Because spirituality changes over time, religion changes over time, and so therefore wouldn't these goddesses as well. And you talk about success. So for you, having, sold some books, written some books, you must have a few shall we say haters?
They must be quiet because I don't. I don't know about
I think
them.
you should have them. You're very successful as far as I'm concerned. Where are they?
I mean,
They're
I would be
fine.
fine with it. I'd be fine with it.
No, but yes, you're also very lovely, and you don't sit there and say, but it does. People will come out if you were successful, and particularly, I think a successful female. Not that I want to make those differences, but it's sort of like,
It's true.
and it's not all from males. I don't want that to be an understood thing, because there's this something happening that I don't quite understand.
No, I think that, I think, talking about competition and things like that overall is that sort of scarcity mindset that, just because you have something means I can't have that too. And I don't think that's true.
Yeah, go write a book on, if someone were to hate you, you would simply think, go write a book on Aphrodite. No one's stopping you.
I've gotten some very touching, that's sarcasm, reviews on some of my books. And that, yes, I often think, first of all, you should have read the first 3 pages where I said, here's some things you need to know about me before you keep reading. But 2, you can write it too. That's great. Please do.
Yeah, from your perspective, because every perspective is going to be different depending on your age, your economics, situation, how you were raised, and that change, and hopefully that perspective changes as you get older, that you grow from how you were raised into how you want to be.
I hope so. I hope that I'm growing. That's the goal. The goal is actually to change and to, I've learned something from everything I've written, from every person I've met. Not always willingly have I wanted to learn all those things, but I have. And it can be really confronting. And I think that's often, at least for me in the past, why I didn't always do that work. It's confronting. It's uncomfortable. Sometimes you have to go, oh, I'm the bad person in this story. And what can I do?
Well, I always think I'm all the characters in the story. So some people are going to consider me the villain. Some people consider Artemis the villain. She had strong boundaries. She wasn't kind to everyone. And so they're going to think of her as bad in the story. But you have to, if you're in any way in a leader type position, or you have to consider the perspectives of everybody in order to, and then make the decision. Nope.
Well, you have to be.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, you have to be willing to consider that there are other perspectives.
Yeah.
I don't think I can actually consider everyone's perspective because I don't know.
No, not. But
it is really, it is wise, because I think that for me at least, leaves the door open to curiosity and kind of keeps defensiveness away. Not always gone, but curiosity, very helpful. Storming in with ideas, not always.
Well, no, and you can't you can consider their perspective, but you can't use it, because you have to make decisions yourself of what's going to come here and what isn't going to do that. And as I pointed out early, I've always loved your books, but they are developing a confidence now. And I am so happy to see that as a reader, and having followed your work. It's just wonderful.
Thanks.
So we have this warrior type goddess, and we're talking about context then and now, and we talk about her virginity. And I know in the book you discuss, well, possibly this or this was said, because you're looking at a lot of different perspectives. I think for me, when I look at that, I think about the idea that because she was also supposed to be responsible for she was a death care goddess. So yeah, there's that similarity too as well. But birth and death had a lot to do with each other at that point, more than we see now. And so if you wanted to stay alive with any certainty, the best thing was to get pregnant. And the only sure way of getting not getting pregnant was to keep your virginity.
Yeah, it's and I think it's so interesting too, because Artemis has that story of her birth, right? And being born under difficult circumstances, and spending 9 days helping her mother birth her twin brother.
Her mother was in labor for 9 days, and
Leto.
don't want to get pregnant after seeing that first thing in life.
Yeah, and it's such a, the Greeks, of course, Leto and Zeus get together because Zeus gets with everybody, and Hera's ticked, and Hera is Zeus's wife, allegedly, and then Artemis is birthed, but then takes on this role of service, and then is associated with birth, and also with, I think she's really associated with, reproductive rights, and like the modern translation.
Because women didn't have control. I mean, she had to ask to have control of her virginity, because they did not have any, you marry who you told you, or you were a slave or a servant that just had to do what you were told. It wasn't a good time.
No. And also, because I'm writing a book on all the Greeks right now, I can connect with a whole bunch of other goddesses now, is, so Artemis asked for virginity, so did Hestia, and so did Athena. And so they were very clear about that no, I want to be my own person. So I find that really interesting, that is of a certain time, and then it's still something debated now, which is interesting to consider.
Well, now science gave women the freedom. And so men don't have to be involved.
It's true. And we're still a little nervous about the Supreme Court taking away some of this in the US. I just read the ruling that went down, or I just skimmed it before this meeting, and that the Supreme Court has not taken away the right for folks to get emergency birth control through the mail. Good.
It is still a matter of life and death for some women. And it is a matter of a good life for women and children, quality of life. So people need to think of Artemis, or as you pointed out, if you want to really modernize it, Wonder Woman. Diana.
I love that. Diana.
And think, and to make sure you vote, and make sure that you have your, because you're protecting those younger girls.
And it's like we talked about, there are different perspectives, and staying open to the fact that there are different perspectives.
Right.
Doesn't mean that I have to agree with what other people do.
No.
Also have the freedom to do what is right for you.
This is one of the things behind Fika, because there was so much arguing and people, saying, okay, that's it, you're wrong. There wasn't any room for conversation or for change or for enlightenment either way. I mean, to enlighten me, I need a lot. We forgot how to speak to each other and to hear each other, because what we hear is the other person saying we're wrong, instead of some of their points that maybe, we don't have to take in everything, but we can listen.
Well, and you're not less of a person because, you don't agree with someone, or because you made a different choice. I think that's really the trick, is that I think there's some weird exchange sometimes that, well, if we don't agree, that means one of us is wrong. No,
I'm wondering, because I want to turn this to a political conversation, but because we don't have freedom of speech here. Sort of glad, because it's complicated. We're not allowed to say mean stuff, and I'm good with that. You can say whatever you want to in your home or your household, but and on the street. But there is, if there are so many different elections, if the voice of the people is so important at each of this election, then perhaps the anger is because they're going to vote a different way. It's actually the voting itself that is creating it. That's all I'm thinking. The numbers game. You know what I mean?
I do, and I don't think the system in the US is necessarily democratic. I think that it looks like it a lot of the time. This is where I'm going to try not to go off on too big of a tangent. But the Electoral College is a very strange system. And the gerrymandering that goes on in so many different places that the vote doesn't actually represent who's there is really challenging for me to think of the vote as being something that's helpful. Do I think it's a tool? Yes. But also, it's challenging and slightly rigged in different situations.
So there we go. That was our political statements for today. And it's fantastic. We allowed ourselves a wild rumpus conversation. And there we have it. It's good. Yay for us, because, you take on Artemis, you take on some of the protectiveness, some of the boundaries, some of the speaking up for yourself and those around you. And which brings us to the fact that also in the book, it is mentioned that she perhaps is a little harsh in punishment, or with people's crops and things if they get too busy cutting down the trees. Excuse me. And so, and she's been around for a long time, and, you get a little tired of things. But do you think ultimately, this is in the book, and that she is an introvert? That she is portraying more of that lifestyle? Because I'm thinking introverts might be drawn to this kind of goddess, because she's saying it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you if you go live in a cave. Not that I'm telling introverts to live in a cave. I'm an introvert. I don't live in a cave. But I've considered it often. It's just very expensive to purchase a cave at this point in time.
It is, yes. The market is horrible for caves right now. Yes.
That's right. So that perhaps this is why she chose to, because she's had to deal with a lot in her life right from day one and been responsible for her life, and so it's not that, so she's just saying don't come any closer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a fair thing to read into the way she interacts. I think that she does definitely seem to be refueled by things that are not other people, and that's sort of the way that I define introvert, because I do like people. It's just that sometimes it's exhausting for me. Not all the time, but sometimes it is. So, I mean, I think that really does track and make sense. And I think that is probably why a lot of folks can relate to Artemis more than some of the other gods that are just a little bit more, out there and up in all the stuff. But there's more gods than just Artemis who are like this. So I would encourage folks to look. Yeah,
going to happen after several years, and it's not about not liking people. I can go. My husband is always amazed because I'll say I want to go out, and he says, "But you always have a fun time when you go out." And I'm like, "Yes, but I'm tired for 5 days afterwards."
right.
And so he doesn't quite. I like those people, I really do, but it's just because, like you, and you think about what you're saying. You filter to a point that is exhausting just because you care. You care. You wouldn't willingly hurt somebody's feelings by saying the wrong thing or whatever. And so that, when you're giving that kind of energy, it tends to take it out of you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I personally have done less of the sort of filtering anymore, but I think there are certain situations. I try not to be in the situations where I have to do that too much, because like, you're right, you're absolutely right. It's exhausting, and maybe a very strong and maybe very relatable example for other folks is hanging out with your family. It can be exhausting because they know you as a certain role in a certain way. And I don't know about anybody else. I don't care how spiritually evolved you are. Sometimes going back to your family is showing you all the places that you haven't quite gotten a few things down. And that's
You're
the biggest
human.
example for me. Yeah, exactly. You're human.
I think that's the point. You're going to make mistakes. And that's why we need these reminders from time to time. We may not, as you pointed out, you can come into Artemis for a set time. But be upfront and honest about what that time is, because she's got other stuff to do. So
She's a busy, busy person and has places to go, people, well, animals to see. So, yeah.
Brian, who is our yes, he's got this figured out. I want to be like, there's nothing wrong with
Right?
living in caves. A basement makes a good modern substitute.
I
Yes,
got you.
Brian, you are. He says, I'm like, I want to be like Brian. He goes, you still haven't got past the guilt. I'm saying no and not going out. so
Yeah.
I'm working on it. I think the older you get, but
Mhm.
when you talk about going back to family and things,
Mhm.
also you write about how her punishments are severe, but if someone may cross her, she may just get rid of them in
Mhm.
one way
Mhm.
or another. But in a modern tense, when you talk about family and things going on, isn't that quite I mean, we can't just say we can't wish them away quite as badly. But as we mature and we learn to walk away
Mhm.
from situations, not because we're angry, but because they hurt over and over again. Do you
Mhm.
think that is sort of like that can be interpreted as that?
I think that one of the things that Artemis brings in that sort of situation is that boundaries are not about changing another person. They're about protecting ourselves and what works for me and what am I going to do in order to keep myself safe. Because I think boundaries in the past were sort of, hard for folks to navigate because it felt like I was being mean towards somebody. And that's not actually what a boundary is. A boundary is if you do that, I'm going to do this. So they have a choice. And
And
I have an action.
that I'll just go and you can tell me if you but that is what ceases toxicity in a relationship. It is this going back and forth. The person that just keeps saying you did this, you did this, you did this, and you're like, okay,
Mhm.
I'm just going to go over here.
Mhm.
The one that follows and keeps trying to pull back because it's not out of meanness. You
Mhm.
are allowing them freedom to be happy. I
Yes.
guess I've never considered that I'm that important, that people can't live a
Mhm.
very happy life without me. Like, so
Mhm. Mhm.
so I was like thinking, yeah, Artemis, I get where you're coming from.
Mhm. She's very clear. There's really no misinterpreting the way she is or the way she's shown up with other folks. You know what you can expect if you blank, because she will do this in response. And I personally think that that makes for a more, I don't know, reciprocal relationship. I love people who just tell me where they're at. Do not sugarcoat it. Just say it. If you're upset, if I did something, please tell me because it gives me a chance to write it or explain it. Or, maybe we decide that this isn't a great interaction. I don't know. But say the thing and trust that I'll receive it.
That is exactly it. But I think people get afraid of being alone and they don't want to lose you, not because of who you are, but because there is a person in my life.
Mhm.
And I need to have a person in my life and they need to
Mhm.
be here with me physically and they need to be a part of things in this picture for Facebook. If I
True.
just took a picture by
True.
myself. So that grasping is not grasping for you, but
Mhm.
for a relationship. You're
Or
just the
security.
villain. Yeah, for
Yeah.
security.
Security and to know that I'm worthwhile. And I think that
Yes.
that's kind of at the root of a lot of things where things go a little messy is like this idea of like, internal worth outside of what anybody thinks, says, does. And it's an ongoing practice for me. I don't have a solid, it's a rickety little foundation. But I think that's one of the things is that more you do have examples in your life of something going not the way you wanted to, and it was still okay. Not immediately, but eventually it was okay because you will be okay.
Yes. Yeah. No, but you're not going to be okay if you allow someone to do it over and over and over
You're
again.
just going to
Um,
shatter your worth as it's trying to build.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you can't get past that. It's,
Yeah.
if you've accepted yourself and you're happy with what you're doing, then you don't need other opinions always over and over again. Um, so yes, I think that was very much a part of what I interpreted from what you wrote. I gave you this world where you could live safely, you know, and you defied that. And now you're gone.
Which sounds like a very similar story to a certain Christian creation myth.
Yes. Yeah, but do you think I feel like, oh God, see, Irisanya, stop it.
Vicky told me I make her think too much. And so
this list of yes, I sent an author. I'm sorry, I'm not writing you questions. My head is too much of a mess. I'm just gonna throw some thoughts at you and we'll go with it. And she was very
Artemis.
brave and trusting of me.
It's the, okay. I mean, it's very very Artemisian to sort of show up and go, I trust that I have the tools that I need for whatever's coming, because the me in that moment will know what to do. That's the best you can do.
Now you need to come back just to discuss the comparisons.
I know too much now. Yes.
No, I don't think I can have that conversation filtered. So, we can't have it. Because everybody has it's just Brian's on a roll here. I'm just going to leave that behind now and change the subject. Look, Brian, you've been talking about various interactions between people. How do gods and goddesses feel about their interactions with humans?
So first of all, hi, Brian. I recognize your name. It's good to see you and see your questions. So there's a couple different things that I've noticed in at least Greek mythology, because I don't think I can speak for everything. But so there are some sources that I've looked at that say the gods really don't give whatever about humans. They're just sort of like up there watching the things. They think they're entertaining. And then there are other sources and other stories that lead you to believe that the gods really are invested in what humans do, or at least they care. So there's not really one answer. My interpretation, if I think of both of those things and I think about the myths that I know and the practices, I think that the gods are definitely interested in what humans do, probably more interested in things that benefit them, but not uninterested in things that aren't. And I think that they find humans to be entertaining, but also a really great source of keeping their stories alive.
Yes. They keep them as a legend that's talked about over and over again.
Humans are good PR for the gods.
Yeah. And back to our other comment, I think, that I changed the subject of. Thank you, Brian. That was a very good question.
Well done.
The thing about the Greek gods, or any of, these gods, regardless, I think, as far as I can think goes, is that they don't pretend to be perfect. They have the most dysfunctional families in the entire world. They are a complete mess.
Yes. Messy AF. Messy AF.
Yes, they do not claim to be perfect. They do not claim to show us the way. So when Artemis just said, that's it, kaboom, you're gone. She wasn't doing it out of any state of perfection. She doesn't feel, that she needs to be perfect. She's the daughter of Zeus. She'll do what she wants. That's pretty much the difference. So she's not saying, I'm doing this for your own good. I don't think the Greek gods are like, they do things for their own good in a lot of ways.
I think they're if there's a phrase to use, at least in this moment, it feels like I could say that the Greek gods are very self-possessed. They're very clear about what is true for them and what the right action is. And even when they do something that doesn't land well with other gods, they don't defend their position. I can't think of one right now.
Yeah, they're not. That is the difference, I think. between those two belief systems. And I would definitely want to be an introvert and put up big boundaries coming from a family like that.
You have got to read more on Hestia. I'll give you a nudge in that direction, because Hestia, big into that.
So. Is that's enough. And so when we talk about family, and my problem with Hera being that instead of just giving Zeus the boot, she blames all these women who most often do not have a choice, or they're fooled into this relationship or whatever that is. And she goes,
Hera.
What's that?
Hera.
And she goes after Artemis, and tells her that she should refrain from lecturing her betters. And this sent me on a spiral, because that immediately brought me into the idea of a classist system where, I am living in the city. I am, is she married, or is she just...
They're married. Hera and Zeus.
Okay. Because I thought you wrote at one point, or was somebody else's writing. So I always thought they were married. So I'm married to the big man.
Yep.
Doesn't matter if he fulfills me or whatever. And that gives me power over you, who run. I thought she said barefoot, but she didn't. So I just interjected that. But run barefoot through the wild, and therefore are lesser than I am. So it brings in the idea of, the closer you are to the wilderness, the lesser you are in civilization. Because why would you? However, as I brought up in a lot of things growing up in a farming community, the farming women had like so much power. If they went down, nobody was eating, bread wasn't being made, the butter, like as it came up, they still had, those women were formidable. Like that was it. So it sort of, to me, brought that connection with Artemis being out in the forest and being put down for that choice. And when the arrows came about her ears, to me it was that she was hearing these words, and they were bringing her down.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always impact, right? Just because there's impact, though, doesn't mean that you respond to it. I mean, I feel like being sort of dismissed as like one of the Olympians in that way, when they all like fought really hard to get to that place, is probably upsetting, I would imagine. And there are a lot of other stories in the mythology that do this too, where they sort of send somebody off to the wilderness because it's a punishment, but they actually become stronger when they're out there. So Artemis, Circe, those are two that pop into my head right now.
But and you have a book on Circe coming out in December?
Yes. What a great transition. Yes, I do.
I live for segues.
Thank you. Thanks.
1 point for me. No. But they sent Circe out as well. No, it is. It is. And yet, on another frame, spiritually speaking, Jesus, the Buddha. I mean, at one point, I just sat here going, everybody who's anybody goes off to the wilderness. How am I supposed to do that with a mortgage and kids? Right?
Oh, absolutely. I think about it all the time.
It's like, how do I go?
Well, and in the Greek mythology as a whole, too, one of the most important, sort of parts, I guess, that's not a great word, but we'll use it, is the underworld and this whole idea of the different kinds of deaths you can have. And Hades isn't an Olympian. Hades is just sort of his own thing. And so also there's that distance from everyone, but it's a really important distance. It's important that he's there. It's important that Artemis is in the woods. It's important that folks are all over the place. And I think that's something to consider too. Again, it's like a contextual thing. Yes, away, but also in a place where their power is more important, or their skills or talents.
And where they are, because as you pointed out, you can never go home. And so she would never be accepted ever by Hera, regardless. No. So that's always going to hurt a little bit, I think. I think this is, I'm not an expert here, people. I just read the books and get.
With all the other beings, I think one of the things that's good to recognize about the Greeks and Greek mythology is that it's its own world. So what happens within the world is what happens and what is presented in the myths that are still surviving and translated. So from what you're asking some great questions, because I'm literally, brain is steeped in the pantheon. I've written about so many different beings and so many different nymphs and satyrs and all the stuff. But I didn't have a sense of any fae, like the way that I think you mean.
Like fairies.
But yeah, exactly. But I would say that nymphs are probably the closest. And that is something that everybody interacts with. The gods have had many children with. And so they do interact quite directly and indirectly. But one of the things to remember with mythologies is that I think as humans, we want to create connections between different pantheons and groups. And I don't think that's wrong, but you wouldn't find that in the mythos. You just wouldn't, because it's not part of the language. And that's
yeah, no, I'm hearing what you're saying, and yeah, because the myths are for that area. It was written at a time where things were not as separated as we might have thought, but were very much separated with their own wars and their own stories. So it would reflect that. Now,
Yeah.
I find it. What drew you to the Greek mythology? What pulled you over there?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. Also, I just want to, something in my brain just needs to finish that last statement.
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I just thought of it right now. So the fae are often connected to land. And so in the Greek mythology, nymphs are usually connected to land. Just something to think about. Okay. Moving back to this other question. And how did I get into this? So my name is Irisanya because I had a big experience with Iris. And Iris is a Greek demigod. I think in the book that she's a minor Olympian. And so that's how I sort of got into the Greeks. I don't think I got into really anybody else at that point. I didn't grow up with Greek mythology. A lot of folks did. Like they had it in school. I didn't.
Yeah, I was, because I actually steered away from it because all we had in schools was Greek mythology and Egyptian mythology. Not to this extent. We didn't know there were so many stories, and if we had, maybe I would have. But I was just like, oh, I've got to find something new after.
Yeah. Oh, I think I met the Egyptians far before the Greeks, and also what some people call Celtic. But so the Greeks, I think it started with my name, and then it sort of expanded from there into, just working with different gods and different classes, and like having that really powerful attraction, let's say, with Aphrodite. Right. And then it just sort of expands from there because there are other people involved in all these stories. And also I was big into Hecate, who is just kind of Greek, kind of not. We could have debates about that, but she's in the book. And I just think that all the stories sort of interwove with each other. So sort of like when you meet one friend and you meet their friend, you sort of start to meet all of them. And then at some point, I just sort of fell into the pantheon and didn't want to come back out. I find their stories so aligned with things that I've been through. And I've also worked so much magic with different Greek stories that it's sort of just part of me at this point. I was in a podcast like a couple of hours ago. We were recording it, and the person asked me, "Have you ever been to Greece?" And I said, "No." I'm going this year. I have never been. I'm just in love with who they are, and they just sort of found me
and the stories around them. I think that's what's lost when it's taught in schools, and that it's so much story, and that gives the background. It makes people more interesting, and as you said, so you can connect with them. You still haven't watched CNA. No. I'm gonna send you a set. No, I don't have a set. But But that pulled, and it is fiction, but that's okay. That pulls in a lot of people, as we say. They follow the fairies with the wings, and then they go into other thought processes about it. So yeah, no, I can see definitely how you got into it, and I'm glad that you did. And so we have Circe to look forward. We have the complete pantheon to look forward to, and I'm sure that's going to have more interacting between the gods in it.
So I have Circe, and then Hestia is coming out before that. Okay. I don't remember. When is it? The spring? So the pantheon has two parts to the book. The first part is really history, cosmology, celebrations, festivals, Greek magic. It's like sort of the foundation,
right? The general things that pull together.
Magic as it was seen in the culture of that time, and different practices and different thoughts behind things. And then the second part is listing all the gods. And it is going from the primordial, the beginning of the beginning with Gaia, and then into the Titans that came from there. And then when the Titans fought all their children and the children won, thus we have the Olympians, and talks about all of them. And then also separates the gods out into the underworld gods, the sea gods, the land gods, and then also as many creatures as I could fit into the word count. And then sort of I sum it up at the end. And there's a really big bibliography. There's a lot of end notes. There's a lot of end notes and bibliographies and recommended reading. And there's a lot. So it's less of the stuff I've done before with building relationships, but it gives you sort of the background. Each of the Olympians I gave a lot of space to. And so they each got their own sort of, here's some things about them, here's some correspondences, and here's a couple stories. So they all got stuff. And so did Hades, because that felt weird to not do that. So I did include him too.
Yeah, even though he's not, he's definitely in the stories, and he definitely has a huge role to play.
Yes.
Brian, do you think that some people are more sensitive to contact with other beings, example Greek gods, or perhaps somehow better equipped for such interaction?
Yeah, I would. So the way I would answer this is that I think that if you have an innate sense or at least willingness towards curiosity, I think you are more open to interactions that are new and also sometimes unexplainable, that sometimes you can follow these threads more easily than if you are not really open to that. I personally could not have guessed that I would be this person right now after growing up. That was not the way I was raised. But I think for me, when I moved to California, really, I mean, I was a witch before I moved here. But
see what happens when you move to California.
Right. When you get out of the Midwest, when you go to California, you realize, oh, everybody's talking about this. I think that when you open it up and you start to hear other people's experiences, you go, oh, that could happen to me. And then I think that just sort of opens it up. But inherent in that question, I think sometimes is that, do you think some people could never do that? I don't think that's true. I think that if you wanted to, you could connect.
Yeah, I think that if you're, as you said, a curious person, a person that finds connections, a person, and it doesn't have to, you start and you set out on this journey. As I read Artemis, I looked back on my life and said, oh, okay. And, this goes with that, and this goes with that. And it is a way of making connections in your life, seeing what was important at that time, and growing in ways. I always say, and with respect to Artemis's beliefs, I'm definitely respecting Artemis's beliefs, but Irisanya's or whoever is here, whether you are a believer or not, this stuff helps because you can connect through the story. And so get the book.
Agreed. That's perfect. Yes, absolutely. Just read more books, buy more books. I mean, I think that part of it too is the willingness to go to the places that excite you and follow it. Because I think there's sometimes this want to know that you're going to be successful in something. And if you're not sure, then you're like, I don't know if I should do it. I think you should anyway, because there are some gods that I've worked with that were amazing, and I don't work with them anymore. And it's okay. We're on good terms. But I still followed that because it made a lot of sense in that moment.
You pick what is anything you start in life. You don't commit to it forever. And so you take what works for you out of that and move on to the next. Always growing, always moving. It's the animation that will attract the attention of, in this case, other gods and goddesses that say, that may be somebody I could work with.
Yeah, now they're all knocking at my door of like, can I be the next book? I have a list, so we'll see who pops up next. I don't know. I have some plans, but I don't.
And call Trevor and say, so this is basically, I think, the most important thing what's coming out of this, and when you talk about relationships. I'm sorry. The other day I was thinking, a speed dial with goddesses.
Oh, I have always wanted to do speed dating with the gods. I think that would be amazing.
Like, can you find who matches you? But
I have literally talked about that for years.
It involves work on your end. It's something that sometimes people forget. It's not like, hi there, this is what I want. I get it. You have to do the work. You have to show up and take that chance. You have to build that boundary. You have to do whatever is being asked of you to go there and take responsibility for your life. Actually, in most of these cases, I would say, Irisanya, that what you show is that it's not about being the easy route that some people might think it is. It's actually a very difficult route. You're not like, okay, I believe in Artemis, and now everything's going to be fine. She's going to take over and everything's going to be good. It's a lot of work and responsibility to take on this kind of relationship.
And I think when you're in a relationship that feels really important to you, you're willing to do that. You're willing to say, absolutely. You're willing to say, this is what I can do, and this is how I will show up. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, I need to look at that in myself, et cetera. So it's, I think I've said this before in a lot of different places, but it's like a human relationship to me. Like, at least that's the framework that I have, because I am a human. And so I think about, how do I make good relationships in my life? And I just apply that. And I get other instruction too about things. I don't have altars to my friends, but I'm sure they might like it, actually. But
don't I think younger people do. I think they have that photo bulletin with all their friends on, and
I definitely have this app called Photo Circle, and that is where we share photos across my friends. And I have different trips that certain friends and I have gone on. And so they are little altars. They're little digital altars.
Yeah, and you go and you think good thoughts, and
that's good. Thank you for that reminder. Thank you.
But anyways, this is, I think, the heart of all of the relationships and all of things that you talk about in your books, is that relationship. So you start off with the introduction to, and that's usually a meditation or whatever that you can work through. And then there's other magical practices along the way. And one that I think is important to squish in here is about looking at the stories from the different perspectives that we were sort of discussing.
I think that, one of my favorite practices is to look at the various Greek stories, or any stories for that matter, and to place myself on the perspective of the different characters and to see how they would have seen this, because it allows me to better understand the nuance of a conversation or of an interaction. It's so easy from the outside to say, this is what happened. And that might be true, but there are different figures involved, and they all have different motivations, and what they did, if you step into their role, might make more sense. It doesn't mean that you excuse it necessarily, but I think that it's a really great practice in all of our relationships. Maybe if I step into and consider someone else's perspective, maybe that will allow me to have more compassion or interact in a way that I actually want to interact versus getting really defensive because I know what you're thinking, and get shut off to this moment of real connection or real repair in a situation that hasn't gone well.
Well, don't you think I'm getting passionate again, but don't you think that a lot of times when people accuse another person, they're relating to them with how they would feel in that situation? Like if some, they're not taking in that person's identity whatsoever. Who that person has doesn't matter if they've been that way for 50 years. They don't see it because they only see how they would react to a situation. And so therefore, as like part of this is listening to people's stories helps you understand them. It's not going to create world peace, but it's a start.
I mean, I think that to a certain extent, I actually do believe that the more we can listen and show up for other people's stories, the more we have understanding, and that does bring out into a world that is more understanding, or at least willing to be with someone in difficult things that they don't understand, but they're willing to hear.
Because you can see things that you've never seen before.
Yes.
If you haven't had, some people can empathize, other people need to have the experience, and it's almost having the experience by listening to someone experience.
I mean, who hasn't had an experience of like, for example, me being in deep grief for a while and other people in my life not understanding that until they had something like that happen to them. And it's true.
Yeah, because
sometimes you can't.
They can be very short with people who are grieving. Like, aren't you over that yet? Or they can be very unkind. They think that they're helping you, but do they? I don't know. I often find when people say somebody doesn't need you or you don't need to be doing that, what they really mean is you could be spending that time with me. So, we take that as okay, Brian, last one. Speaking of altars, when we collect books of specific authors, does this count as an altar?
Okay. To be fair, all these back here are my books. So yes, technically.
It's creating an altar too. Yes. And yes, Brian, I do think my little free library is an altar because I ultimately push up the idea of everybody being able to read. That is so I make a pledge to the book gods and it flows through. And it was interesting. I was talking to another witch. I have lovely witches, not the Macbeth kind. And she was saying that this entity talked to her through books. And the idea that a character is somebody wanting to get through to that they're there and what's going on, I just find way too cool. As Artemis did this way. I would never have been thinking the things that I have and probably would sleep better, but
you and me both.
If I hadn't picked up this book. Well, that's the problem. Thinkers,
Thinkers, it's the Gemini. It's the
are you a Gemini?
I'm a Sagittarius. No, I'm a Sagittarius with Gemini Moon and Gemini Rising. So there's a lot of Gemini, and it's what you portray and who you are inside. So it's a lot of Gemini.
My kid's a Gemini. So the raccoon hat. Yeah.
Shiny objects all over the place. And I will say too, like for seeing characters in books or seeing characters in other situations. So, Iris, not to like get away from Artemis for a second, but Iris is the messenger of the gods. And in order to sometimes bring messages to humans, she would show up in an image that would make sense to them. Not necessarily as this, big rainbow being, right? And so I would just, I think that's an interesting thing to think about.
She would be the person that they could relate to.
Yes.
And that's also part of that whole trick I think of be relatable. And that's also whenever it comes to any of these people, I think the idea of bringing the context of what was into now and how it works in a more modern setting now is something we all could think about because they are templates. As far as I'm concerned, it's just all templates. Every problem you've ever had has been put to pen at some point in time, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of influence, absolutely, from what's gone on in the past. And yeah, I agree that thinking about how morality was viewed and how, they're different cultures, they're going to do things different ways. And one of the greatest lessons of being an adult, or it's like maybe being self-aware, is to recognize sometimes two things can be true at the same time.
Oh, we can feel two things at the same time. Like, it's that flowing, right? Like 1 minute the worst thing in the world after COVID, all of these people had all this time on their hands and were willing to do interviews. And so I got to talk to some of my favorite people and I'm like, oh my gosh, how can I be feeling so good when this horrible thing is happening to other people? But we can.
Yeah. I think we need to.
We can't.
Yeah.
And that was that. So, Irisanya, we talked about Circe and Hestia and pantheons.
Yeah.
So you have books coming out the 1st of December.
Yes. And March something. And Pantheon, I have to turn it in, so I have no idea. And then there are 2 other books I've agreed to after that. So there's more to come.
There's more to come. She will be
more
there.
Greeks.
And so we have, and I'm really getting into it. So you broke that whole school thing of, oh no, not the Greek again. For me, you have magic.
I'm done.
We have your website. Scrolling down. I mean, it's like anything. She's out there. She's everywhere. If you put Irisanya Moon into, so it's Iris as in the flower, Anya as in Frozen, right?
You're not
or
wrong.
any of the choose. You will find her. She'll pop up with her Facebook and her
lots of things. Yeah, and you can find a lot of things on YouTube of presentations I've done, so you could see me in that. I've been on so many podcasts that I have a playlist of my podcasts on Spotify. It's like 17 hours or something. So want to hear me say a whole bunch of things, often irreverently.
So your YouTube is, I don't know if I
my YouTube, no, so you can find, I do have a YouTube. It's perpetually under construction. I need to focus. But just on YouTube in general, there's tons of things that I've done that have been uploaded there.
Search you, if you go to YouTube and you search Irisanya Moon.
Yeah, I've tried to get them on my channel too. So if you do want to find me too,
you know what? When you're doing anything like this, and you're doing it on your own, there is so much out there. I have a to-do list that, it
never ends.
You have to just keep moving forward.
Oh, the other day I was like, I'm going to make an oracle deck.
I get it. With the Greek pantheon?
I have this thing about visiting flowers, and I have all these pictures of flowers, and I sort of feel like that's...
Well, I see them on your Facebook.
Going to be a thing. Yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
We'll see. It's in gestation.
Yeah, no, you just... Okay. I'm still frozen.
You're coming back, though. I hear your voice now.
Okay, let's make this fast.
Yeah, we should do. I guess
all right.
We're done.
Yes. Thank you so much for visiting.
Thank you
Today.
Thanks for having me back.
Yep, and we'll get together again. Hopefully.
We'll meet again. Absolutely.
Hopefully, yes. I haven't seen you ways. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. And for the rest of you, I'll see you next week. Until then, may your coffee be hot and Your story's sweet. Thanks for listening, everyone. And I'm getting the music now. Okay, there we go.